Welcome everybody to Moving Markets. Today is May the 21st, 2019. My name is Jeffry Dunyon, owner and founder of Safe Option Strategies. Glad to have you on board as we talk about another day of what is moving the stock markets and what, if anything, is moving or is going to move our economy. As we begin the presentation today, we're about midway through the trading day. It's 11 o'clock in Mountain Time Zone. It's 1 o'clock on the East Coast. The markets have a few more hours that they're open, so we're right about that midpoint. Right now, the Dow is up about 155, almost 160 points, near its session high. NASDAQ likewise is up 85 and a half. S&P up about almost 25. All in all, a good day on the market. It is still a few hours. Things could turn around. Things could change. I don't expect them to. Couple of things driving the markets this morning. Number one, Huawei, the large Chinese tech company. They kind of dominate the cell phone market the way Apple and Samsung may dominate it here in the U.S. They sell their product in the U.S. They're for a while, the United States now has accused Huawei, and I think rightfully so, of building in spy software into their devices, doing some nefarious things. You remember it's been 6 months ago or more, maybe longer than that, the CFO of Huawei was arrested in Canada, and there's battle to try and extradite her to the United States and have her tried for basically spying and espionage against the United States. So Huawei is they're a tough character. They want to be a dominant player in telecommunications, in not just their handsets that they build, but they want to be a dominant player as well in building out 5G networks and playing a role in that. In the backdrop, and anyways, what's moving the markets today is that some of the sanctions, some of the stuff that was leveled at Huawei. The United States, through an executive order by the president, put some restrictions on what companies can do with Huawei and what kind of business they can transact. And that initially it was believed that kind of hurt the market, was part of what the sell-off was yesterday. Today things are bouncing back because the talk is that things are easing or lightening up a little bit on the Huawei front, that some of those political sanctions that have been put in place are sort of subsiding a little bit, for lack of a better way to say it. And you have a lack of any big major news events that's helped moving the market up. A lot of people believe that people saw the most recent sell-off as an opportunity to buy, that they still think the underlying fundamentals of the market are solid and strong, and that there's no reason to feel like things are going in a negative direction. There are some retail companies that are warning about the impact of the trade wars and the trade negotiations. I guess some lawyers at Nike, Under Armour, and JCPenney. JCPenney of all people, I wouldn't have put them in bed with Nike and Under Armour, but apparently they wrote a letter that was given to Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and I think President Trump was included on that. They gave this letter to the president saying, would you please make an exception and ease back on the tariffs for specifically for shoes, obviously, if you're talking Nike and Under Armour. And they said it's going to hurt our industry maybe to the tune of as much as $7 billion. The tariff situation is tough because any company in the U.S. that has their products manufactured in China is going to take a hit on the tariffs up front. And they're going to continue to take a hit on the tariffs until the time comes that the products are manufactured elsewhere. China will take a bigger hit in the long run because companies will do one of two things. I mean, companies like Nike, companies like Under Armour, companies like Apple, other U.S. companies that have their product manufactured in China, shipped back to the U.S. for a large portion or maybe a majority of their sales, are basically going to say to the manufacturers, "Look, we're not going to eat this 25%. We're going to pass that. You're going to have to cut your prices by 25%." Or we're going to take our manufacturing needs somewhere else. We're going to build factories or contract with factories in the Philippines, in India, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Japan. I mean, there are a lot of other places where the U.S. can have these products manufactured and made that will do it for a lower price and not have the tariffs. Or maybe they'll do it for a slightly higher price but not have the tariffs. I mean, what if a company in India said, "Hey, China's charging you $1 to make this product. We'll charge you $1.05. That's a 5% increase, but you're going to save 25% on the tariff when it's shipped back over to the United States." That's a win situation for the company in the U.S. A company can absorb a 5% increase in its cost. It's harder for a company to absorb 25%. Keep in mind that 25% is 25% on the cost of the product, not 25% of what they sell the product for. In other words, Under Armour makes a shoe that they sell you for $100. The cost of manufacturing that shoe might be $5. A 25% increase on that $5 shoe means Under Armour is going to pay $6 for it instead of $5. So if they raise our price from $100 to $101, they don't lose any money. We as the consumer would see a 1% price increase, not a 25% price increase in the cost of that product. So it's not something that we, the consumer, would get devastated by if that tariff was ultimately passed along to us. Now, some things that don't have that big a margin, some things where the margin is a lot smaller than that, the consumer, the company, is going to take a bigger hit on it. So in the short run, it will affect the U.S. companies. It will affect the U.S. consumer. But ultimately, they're going to change where they have their products manufactured. They're going to change where they have them built. If we get 4 more years of Donald Trump, if we were to get Congress to get out of the way of Trump's economic agenda, now they won't do it. It's a big if. They simply won't do it because if any Democrat went along with Trump, or if the Democratic Party as a whole went along with Trump and said, "Okay, we'll give you more tax cuts. We'll give you more deregulation. We'll free up the banks to loan more money to small businesses. We'll free up the banks to loan more money to factories. We'll free up regulations on these factories." A lot of this manufacturing that takes place in China, a lot of this manufacturing that takes place in Mexico and elsewhere wouldn't have to take place there at all if our own government would get the hell out of the way of regulating U.S. companies to the point where they have to pay so much more to get the same product manufactured. Now, it's unrealistic to think that we're going to manufacture for the same price as China. They have incredibly, you for all those people who complain about U.S. labor laws and equal pay and minimum wage here in the U.S., those workers in China and Indonesia and India and the Philippines and places like that, they work for pennies on the dollar of what the U.S. does. And funny thing, they're grateful to have a job instead of the moaning and complaining that U.S. workers do over not getting paid enough and not having good enough health care. Instead of being grateful that they have a job, they're upset because they can't afford the same boat as the CEO of the company can afford. But, heaven forbid somebody makes more money than you because they're more valuable to the company. What's interesting too to me is that the people that complain about that, they don't seem to be upset that a star athlete gets paid more than a rookie athlete who hasn't proven himself. They don't get upset that Tom Hanks makes more money to produce a film than some no-name guy that nobody has ever heard of that has his first minor role in a film. They don't complain about that, but they complain like crazy that a CEO of a company makes a lot more money than they do. And it's pretty hypocritical when you think about it. But anyway, it's the easing of stuff on Huawei and the lack and the absence of other news today is really what's driving the markets up. Probably not much that's going to happen in the next 3 hours. On any given day, anything can happen. that can change things, but there's probably not a lot that's going to happen in the next few hours that's going to, catapult the market farther to the upside or reverse it and have it sell off. Now, in the last hour that the markets are open, it's not uncommon for things to reverse or things to really take off stronger in one direction or the other. So don't be shocked if that's what happens. But we're having a good day when you consider that the Dow is up more than double of what it lost Monday, and that 3 out of 5 days, 3 out of 4 days last week, after the huge sell-off on Monday of last week, 3 out of the next 4 days got a lot of that back. We're not far off of where we were before Monday's big, huge sell-off. In fact, we're pretty close to where we were prior to that. So it's, things are going to continue to be volatile until there's some progress made on the front of a deal with China. Things are going to continue to be volatile. Okay, I want to go into the second big lie about socialism. So all this week, yesterday, we started with the lie about whether or not socialism has ever worked anywhere in the world. And no matter how proponents of socialism want to point to other places where it has worked, it simply hasn't. It's a lie. You either have to lie about the system that they claim socialism is working under. We talked about places like the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway. We talked about places like that where they claim it's socialism, but rather it's a strong capitalist society that allows some more socialist programs, but they have small populations of people, and the people are kind of stuck in a range. No one really moves up the corporate ladder there. There's very little innovation. There's very little new businesses there. So it's really not an example at all of socialism. And those economies are moving closer and closer and closer to bankruptcy with all the expensive social programs that they have. The programs themselves are not shining examples of stellar social programs. The free healthcare that gets touted in some of these countries that have free healthcare. Number one, it's not free. People's high tax rates are paying for it. And number two, it's crappy healthcare. Plain and simple. Compared to what we have here in the United States, it's just straight up crappy healthcare. So you cannot find an example of where socialism has ever worked before, and that's the number one lie. The number two lie that I want to talk about today, in order to believe that socialism is a good thing, you have to believe that government can do things better than the private sector. And they simply cannot. And you cannot, once again, you cannot find evidence of where the government does something better and something more economically efficient than the private market can do it, than the private sector can do it. Let me give you a shining, bright example, and you don't need to look any further than this. For many years, the U.S. Post Office was the one organization, the one department, the one division of the government that actually paid for itself. It actually brought in enough revenue to operate itself without operating at a deficit. In the last couple of decades, that has been flipped on its head and changed massively. One of the reasons it's changed is because free market capitalism came in the way of FedEx, UPS, and other shipping companies that have done a better job, a faster job. They have done it more efficiently, and they have done it profitably. And it has hurt the United States Post Office because the United States Post Office ran under a heavy bureaucracy, and they were destined for failure. Even years that they were operating in the green, they were getting closer and closer. They were declining on a steady ramp. The problem is this: when you have the government try to run something, costs go up and efficiency of process goes down, simply because you have too many players in the game. Government is never willing to shrink. That's the simple fact. When someone in a government organization has a budget, they never want that budget to shrink. They always want that budget to increase. And money gets spent on frivolous things. Money gets spent on bloated bureaucracy. Money gets spent on employees that are not doing anything productive to lend to the organization itself. And as a result, the costs go up and up and up, and the efficiency goes down and down and down. Imagine, pick any government agency you want to. Now, the one small exception might be the military, but I think you could make a strong argument that even all of the politicians that get a hand in decision making in the military cause things to run less efficiently. You used to hear these stories. I remember hearing these stories 20, 30 years ago about a toilet seat at the Pentagon costing $3,000. Well, that may be an exaggeration, maybe not. I don't know if it is an exaggeration, but here's where the problem exists. If I need to replace a toilet seat in my house, I'll go to Home Depot, I'll go to Lowe's, I'll probably go online first, and I'll look and see who's got the better priced toilet seat. I'll look and see which one is easier to install so that I don't have to pay someone to install it myself. I'll go down to Home Depot, I'll look at it, I'll look at the quality of the item. If I don't like the quality for the price, and I know Lowe's has something at a similar price, I'll go over to Lowe's. In my case, they're across the street from each other. I'll go over to Lowe's and I'll look at the price, and I'm doing all of this myself. I'm taking time out of my schedule, and my time is valuable, but I'm taking a little bit of time out of my schedule. I'm researching something, I'm finding what works, and I'm taking care of it. Now, in the government, you don't get that. And I'm a consumer. I'm an end consumer, but go to the private sector. Go to a company. Go to an accounting firm that is in your town or in your neighborhood, and maybe they own the building that they're in, and they've got a broken toilet seat. Okay, someone there, an office manager, a supply manager, whoever they hired, maybe they contract someone to do the janitorial work. They see that toilet seat is broken, and they go to a catalog and they order one, and they probably pay $20 or $30 for the toilet seat, and they put it in place, and they're getting paid hourly throughout the day, so everything is done correctly. Now, if you take a government account, let's say you've got a government accounting agency, and they want that new toilet seat. Here's the problem. Because of government regulation, to make everything fair, to not leave anyone out, to be politically correct as all hell, they've got to go out and get 3 bids on replacing that toilet seat. They can't just have a janitor in the building walk over to Lowe's and buy the toilet seat and put it in. Oh my gosh, that leaves people out of the process. There might be a minority-owned company that makes toilet seats that was unfairly left out of the bid process. And so now you've got to get 3 or 4 or 5 bids, and you can't award the bid to the lowest company, the lowest price company. You have to award the bid based on some ridiculous moronic criteria that has been put together by politicians and bureaucrats that says if these prices are within 75% of each other, then we need to have a disproportionate number of these bids go to the minority-owned business or the female-owned business or the Native American-owned business or the business that's smaller. Even though it's going to cost us 3 times as much, we have to do it that way because someone wrote a law somewhere that said that's the fair way to do it. And then that company has got to go and get several bids for the company that's going to go and install that toilet seat, because we can't just have the janitor in the building do it. He hasn't passed off 7 Environmental Protection Agency certifications that say it's okay for him to put in that toilet seat. And we got to have a special licensed plumber that we're going to pay 3 times the going rate of a regular plumber to put that in. And we got to get 4 bids on that because there are 4 different people that can do it. And this is what bureaucracy does. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. I really don't think I'm exaggerating. Even if there's a desire at a government level to do something more efficiently, they simply cannot. Everything the government does is going to cost more money because of the idiotic, stupid rules that they put in place before they can spend any money. Now, add to that the fact that we've got to pay congressional salaries and Senate salaries and pay salaries for all their staffers, and they want to delay the process and make it take 10 times longer than it has to, because before we replace this toilet seat, we need to hold a committee meeting to determine determine if this toilet seat really needs to be replaced, and is there an environmentally safe toilet seat that could replace it better, and do we have to have a committee meeting to decide if using natural wood is harmful to the forest, and then we're going to have to get another committee in on whether or not that's going to unfairly cut down some trees to build that toilet seat, and then we're going to have another committee decide, is there going to be a splinter in our butt at the end of this process? So do we go to a man-made product instead of a natural product? If we do a man-made product, is that going to pollute the environment to make it? Is it going to burn some more gas or coal in the plant that makes it? I mean, this is what government does. They are bloated and they are huge. And so this comes to the lie of socialism, the notion that any product or service that can be delivered to an end consumer, be it healthcare, be it infrastructure build out. If you want to talk about, the post office was, I think is a shining example of government inefficiency. If you talk about any product or service that the government wants to get their hands on and wants to provide to the people, the energy sector, the EPA is one of the worst. They are absolutely one of the worst. And I'm not in favor of polluting the environment, and I'm not against protecting the environment. Let the individual states do it in their state and get the federal government the crap out of it. Get them away from it. But to buy into the lie of socialism being a good system, you have to believe that the government could run anything in this country more efficiently than the private sector could do it. And it simply cannot happen. It is an impossibility. And anytime you hear a Bernie Sanders, an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I heard some nut job college student, whack job. I mean, this guy was dumber than dirt. One of the dumbest human beings I've ever had the disprivilege of listening to in my life was on a program at the end of last week arguing for socialism. And this was his argument. Anytime someone said, well, how are you going to pay for that? He said, we can't afford not to do it. Oh my gosh, that is the stupidest, moronic way to try and answer that question. How are you going to pay for it means where are you going to come up with the money? The answer is not we can't afford not to do it. Bullcrap. We can't afford to do these stupid programs. And we certainly can't afford to involve the government because everything the government tries to do for us becomes more expensive and less efficient. The facts bear that out. There is not one statistic, not one fact you can find anywhere in the world, in the history of this country, in the history of the world, that shows that government can do something more efficiently than the private sector. That is the second big lie that you are told about socialism. So you've got to buy into the fact that it's ever worked anywhere, and you've got to buy into the idea that the government could do it more efficiently. And those are two of the four lies that lead up to the biggest lie that we're going to get to on Friday. The next lie, I'm going to give you a teaser for tomorrow's program. The next lie we're going to talk about is this lie that capitalism doesn't work. Kind of goes hand in hand with the entire lie that socialism does work, but the lies that are told about capitalism and the benefits that come to people through capitalism is one more of the four lies you have to buy into if you're going to buy into the biggest lie about socialism. I hope this is an education. I hope every single one of my listeners will share this with their friends and their family members and their coworkers who think that socialism is a good thing. Share it with them and say, listen to this. You can't argue with the logic of this. You can try and make an emotional argument for any part of it, but you cannot lie with you cannot disagree or argue effectively with the logic of this. I hope you join us tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.